Hello and welcome everyone to a special edition of My Future Energy Career. Today will be our first joint interview and we will be interviewing today's STEM heroes, Emily Hazelwood and Amber Sparks. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being here. So Amber and Emily are both co-founders of the Blue Latitude Foundation. And we're so happy to have you guys. And without further ado, I will pass it off to them and they can talk a little bit about their career.
Thanks so much, Jalen. We're really excited to be here. Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Sparks. And as Jalen mentioned, I'm a co-founder with Emily here for the Blue Latitudes LLC and our nonprofit, the Blue Latitudes Foundation. I'm an oceanographer, an educator, and an entrepreneur. And we're really excited to talk to you a little bit more about our career today.
And hi, everyone. I'm Emily, and I am also a co-founder of the Blue Latitudes Foundation and Blue Latitudes LLC, which is a women-owned marine environmental consulting firm. I'm a marine conservation biologist and energy consultant and entrepreneur.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the introductions. And Emily and Amber have a video prepared for us.
So this video just gives you a little bit of an understanding of what Emily and I do. We are marine scientists that dive on offshore oil and gas platforms, and we look at these amazing ecosystems that have developed below the surface. We study the different types of marine environments, the scallops, mussels, anemones growing on these platforms, and the schools of fish that swim around these structures and call it their home.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. Really cool video there. And we will move into a little bit about where you guys are from.
So I was born and raised in Southern California, Laguna Beach, California. I just fell in love with the ocean as a young kid, and it's something that's fueled my curiosity and my passion for the ocean throughout my academic pursuits and my career.
And I grew up in New Hampshire. And a fun fact about New Hampshire is it has the shortest coastline in the United States, only 19 miles. But on those 19 miles is where I fell in love with the ocean and grew up. For me, that understanding really developed, that appreciation really developed after I graduated from college. I had the opportunity to go and work on the BP oil spill, which at the time was the largest oil spill in the history of oil and gas development. It was the largest natural man-made disaster ever. And it really gave me an appreciation for the fact that, you know, we all drive cars, we turn on the lights in our home, we use plastics, we're all responsible for those offshore oil and gas platforms. And it really gave me an understanding of the impacts those structures could have. But what was really interesting about that time was that we had our boats were all driven by fishermen that had lost their jobs because of this spill. And all they could talk about was how unbelievable the fishing was on those offshore oil platforms. So those same oil platforms that caused this massive oil spill also made all these beautiful habitats for fish. And it was my first time kind of understanding how complex these issues can be and how sometimes there can be a silver lining between industry and environment.
I think Emily really struck a chord there that I can echo in terms of wanting to make a difference on our environment, for our environment, based off of the way that we live our lives today. We turn on the lights in our house, we all drive cars, all contributing to, you know, the impacts on the environment that stem from industry. And so I was really passionate about trying to find a way to find silver linings in that interaction and actually find ways for industry and environment to work together towards something more positive.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for sharing. Now we will move on to some of your interests.
So I really love everything to do with the ocean. If there's a way for me to get in and have fun in the ocean, I'm going to try and do it. So that includes snorkeling, diving, surfing, and all of these things really sparked my interest in science, technology, energy, and math, those fields, those STEM fields. It's because of the ability to actually be in the ocean and spend time at the beach that made me really curious about it and want to learn more.
And I was very fortunate because I come from a family of scuba divers. My dad was a dive master, my mom was a diver, and they got my brother and I certified as soon as we came of age. So for me, I was 12 years old. And I still vividly remember the first time I took a breath underwater. And it was so incredible. And I just couldn't believe that I'd spent 12 years of my life on the surface and I'd never seen this underwater world, and being able to access that world and spend time down there really changed my perspective on ocean exploration and how big our world really is and how little of it we've discovered. I think that everyone can be a scientist. You know, you don't need to have your PhD to be a scientist. Often exploration and discoveries can be made in your own backyard, and it's a matter of taking that first step to go and explore and start taking notes on what you're observing. You know, a scientist is basically an observer. They observe the world around them and take notes, and it's amazing the discoveries that you can find even in your own backyard. And fortunately, diving is not just an ocean sport. There's a lot of freshwater diving in lakes as well as in quarries. So it's not just a sport that you can only do when you're on a coastline. So I encourage anybody that's interested in the ocean or interested in becoming a scientist or just interested in exploration to take those first steps, even if that means in your own backyard.
Yeah, I can add to that another great way to explore our oceans. You know, you don't have to live by the beach to appreciate the oceans. You could maybe go out and try a new type of fish or something at a restaurant. Having the ability to connect with the ocean can happen in so many ways. It doesn't have to be through actually being at the beach. You could try a new food. You could go, like Emily said, go explore in your own backyard. These are different ways to try new things that connect you either to the ocean or the natural environment, and hopefully will inspire you to want to continue to study or learn more about STEM fields.
Moving on, we'll go into your educational pathway.
So I went to UC Berkeley for my undergrad and studied marine science there, and I went on to get my master's degree in marine biodiversity and conservation at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which is in San Diego as part of the University of California, San Diego. It's in La Jolla, and it's a fabulous institution that has really studies so many facets of oceanography. It's an incredible place for bright minds and new and inspirational thinkers who are trying to find solutions to some of the problems that face our oceans. Go to Scripps. So it was really cool to be able to be there and be a part of that community. And that's where I met Emily, actually.
And I went to Connecticut College in Connecticut, and I got my degree in environmental studies. And I knew that I wanted to get back into the ocean and back into studying what lies beneath the waves. So that was when I made the decision to go to Scripps Institution of Oceanography and get my degree in marine biodiversity and conservation. Not only was it eye-opening to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, talk about a culture shock, but it was also really eye-opening to get introduced to all these different scientists and students that, just like me, had a really deep passion for the ocean. For me, my most memorable experience was during a physical oceanography class. I got the opportunity to go out on one of the research vessels that Scripps has. They have these massive, massive, massive research vessels that have ROVs on them. They have sediment samplers on them, water samplers on them. And we had the opportunity to go out in the field and use all these different types of pieces of equipment to get firsthand experience as to how that types of science gets done. I'd never seen some of the machines that we were using and some of the samplers that we were using, and we were trawling for fish at depths, you know, right around 1,000 feet. It was just incredible to get that firsthand experience, you know, wear the hard hat, pull up the water sampler. It was just a really awesome experience for me.
And for me, I'd say one of my favorite memories from Scripps was we did a field trip to a research station on Catalina Island, which is right off the coast of Southern California. And at this field station, we were able to dive and snorkel and actually do some small research projects in the kelp forests that are around the Catalina Island. And it was really, really fun to be able to go out there and see firsthand what was happening with the kelp forests and do our research projects there. It was a really exciting opportunity. And we actually stayed on the island for a few nights. It was a really good time.
Awesome. Yeah, those both sound like amazing experiences. But yeah, we will move on to some things you had to learn to get where you are today.
So some things that really influenced me along my path to my ultimate career where I am today is I really had to learn how to work in a lab and in the field, because you can have these amazing experiences out in the field collecting data where you actually get to be in the ocean, which is some of the most rewarding moments of being a marine scientist. But then there are also aspects of taking what you learned in the field back to the lab or back to your office where you process that data. And so being able to balance those two offices is really important. And lastly, I had to learn how to take what I'd found out in the field and what I processed in the lab, and I had to be able to find a way to talk to the general public about it. How can I convince my grandmother that it's important that we preserve these really unique ecosystems underneath an oil platform? That was a really big challenge for me. So I had to go out there and use underwater imagery and interesting stories to try and talk to the public and my family about why it's important that we have a healthy ocean and what that can look like in its many forms.
And for me, I needed to learn patience and perseverance. Although I always loved the sciences, there was definitely some classes in math as well as in chemistry that did not come easily for me. And I needed to learn new ways of teaching myself the science and the chemistry and the math and new skills, maybe ways that I worked in the classroom didn't necessarily work for me, and I had to go back and kind of reteach myself because those were always challenges for me, but I didn't want those classes to prevent me from entering the sciences, something that I love so much. So for me, it was a lot of patience and perseverance and being a little bit creative in how I could get around and over some of those boundaries that were initially blocking me from entering a career in the sciences.
So having a healthy ocean is so important. The oceans are the foundation for so many things that we take advantage of and appreciate on land, including having rain and clean water. They all come from this unique balance and interaction with the ocean. And so it's really important that we keep our oceans very healthy. The oceans are also another important place for a major food source. So many cultures rely on the oceans for a significant part of their protein intake. So it's important that we keep our oceans healthy so that that food source remains stable for so many different communities. And then there's also the intrinsic beauty and the value of having a place to go and relax and enjoy. The ocean is a sanctuary for so many people, and it's really important that we keep it a healthy, vibrant ecosystems for all of us to enjoy and for our children and our children's children to enjoy.
And I had a question for you, Emily. You mentioned that some STEM subjects were particularly challenging for you. And for students who are also struggling with those same topics, how did you get through, how did you get through these topics in college? What methods did you use to succeed when you were facing adversity?
For me, a lot of times I would get intimidated in a class that might have 100 people in it to raise my hand and ask a question about something I didn't understand. I would sit in the back and maybe not say anything and struggle with it after. So for me, what was really valuable and what really helped me was forming relationships with my professors, seeking them out after class and getting, extra help or extra tutoring and getting some one-on-one time with them. And as I got further and further along in my science courses, the classes became smaller and, I started to develop the confidence to ask those questions, but making sure that I got one-on-one time with my professor or maybe with some other students that were more advanced than me in those courses was really important, because I would get so intimidated to raise my hand in front of a class of 100 people and be wrong. So for me, that was really important, was to get that one-on-one time.
Yeah, great advice. It's always important to ask questions. But yeah, thank you guys for sharing. Next, we will move on to some advice you have to offer.
So my advice for people who are looking to get involved with STEM careers, or really maybe even just start to learn about what different avenues there could be in STEM careers, I encourage people to stay connected to people, organizations, and groups that share similar passions as you have, whether that be in science or technology, engineering, math, whether it's the ocean or in forestry, or maybe in, you know, really unique like mountain ranges or different areas that, I mean, who knows, maybe it's something in your backyard has just really sparked your interest, and it's important to find other people who share that interest and connect with them. There's so many ways to connect these days, even if it's virtually. You can connect through different online groups on Facebook or different meetups. It's always important to check with your parents and make sure that you are joining these groups with their permission. And being able to do that will help to create a community that will foster your passions and continue to challenge you as you move through your career and continue to, you know, seek out that passion.
For me, it's you should always stay curious and be adaptable. You know, curiosity, asking questions about the world around you, is one of the fundamentals for being a good scientist, but also being curious about the world around you is what will continue to inspire you to challenge ideas or traditional concepts, to ask questions about the world and how it works. That will always inspire you and drive you forward. And I think being adaptable is also extremely important. You know, there's more than one way to approach a problem, just like there's more than one way to get to your career of your dreams. But sometimes that means being adaptable. Sometimes that means you might need to move to a new place far from home for a little while. Sometimes that means taking a course that might challenge you. But I think being flexible and adaptable and curious are some of the most important and fundamental characteristics that will help you be successful. I think for me, being curious about the world around me, asking questions about the world around me, is what's always driven me. You know, I wanted to know more. The first time I went diving, I wanted to know more. What were these marine species? What was, you know, how does pressure affect me as I go deeper on my dive? Or even when I was even younger and I would go tide pooling, you know, how did these creatures get here? How do they survive in these tide pools? And then, you know, from a professional standpoint, it's how do I get a job that will allow me to study this? And what kind of jobs are out there? And broadening my mind as to the possibilities that existed, I think was always driven by curiosity. And for me, that's always been an important fundamental in my life. I actually think I wrote my college essay. They asked, what was your favorite word? And I'm fairly certain mine was curiosity. So that's always been a fundamental aspect of my life.
Curiosity is the key to wanting to learn more about the environment that you're in, or maybe the thing that is really your passion, something that's driving you. Passion often comes from curiosity. And so for me, ever since I was little, I've always been really curious about the natural world that surrounded me, which just happened to be the ocean. Because I grew up by the ocean, I was really curious about it, and I wanted to learn more, and that curiosity has sparked my passion and continued to fuel my pursuits, both through academia and in my career. And it all stems from curiosity, and it also sort of reignites my passion and interest every day. Every day there's a new question, something new to learn that just reignites that curiosity and keeps me moving forward. So I say that it's very important.
Yeah, thank you guys once again for sharing. And next, we will move on to our student question portion. You mentioned that a lot about your job is communicating your findings to the public, or more specifically, maybe some people who aren't knowledgeable about the field that in which you work in. And my question to you is, what's the biggest challenge for trying to communicate all these findings to the general public and people who don't know a lot about marine biodiversity?
Well, I think, one of the biggest challenges that exists in sciences right now is that there's all this incredible science going on, but they get published in these dense scientific papers, which most people don't pick up scientific papers and read them. Unless you're in school or you're a scientist or you're a consultant, the vast majority of people aren't picking up or looking up scientific papers. They're looking for guides or things that disseminate that science and break it down for them. So I think a big challenge right now in the sciences is how do you get from those scientific papers to the general public, and without losing, those core scientific findings that are in those papers. And there's a lot of really great tools that have been coming out that do help the general public figure that out. For Amber and I personally, a lot of what helps us is using visual media, whether that's putting together films or photography or YouTube videos. For us, we found that seeing is believing. And if we can communicate our science through visual media, it makes a big impact on helping the public understand visually what we're doing.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks again. And last question for the both of you. What was the biggest challenge you guys faced when you were working, may it be in the field or in the office? And how did you work to overcome that challenge?
I would say that one of the biggest challenges that we've faced is a general lack of public understanding around some of the work that we do. I think that sometimes people think about offshore oil and gas platforms and they think of oil spills. And I completely understand that. I mean, growing up in Southern California, I never imagined that those offshore platforms could be vibrant ecosystems or valuable reefs. And so combating that lack of public understanding has been a really big challenge for us. But as Emily just mentioned, we have really taken that in stride and worked towards communicating the value of the healthy ocean and what that means for a variety of different ecosystems, including those underneath oil platform structures. So overcoming that has been a really great challenge for us.
Awesome. Emily, do you have anything to add? Maybe a different challenge or kind of the same for you?
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a big challenge for us. I think what I would add is that fortunately in sciences, it's becoming much more technologically advanced. You see all these exciting developments happening, but in a lot of industries in the sciences, there's still the same old standards that are hard to break the mold on. And especially in oil and gas, where Amber and I work, I think we're really working to try and break that mold of what's traditionally seen as what you're supposed to do with an oil platform, is what you're supposed to, studies you're supposed to do, the age you're supposed to be to do those studies. I think we're really working to break that mold to get industry and the public alike to think differently about their offshore resources and how they're managed, and really trying to introduce new concepts as to new ways of thinking about how we dispose of our ocean resources, how we recycle, and how we might modify an industry that's been around for hundreds of years, but really hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, awesome. Great answers. But yeah, I would like to wrap up the webinar here. I just want to give a big thank you to both of our STEM heroes today for jumping on this webinar and sharing more about your career and educational pathways. Yeah, and I also
Thanks for having us.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you guys so much for coming on today. I also want to give a big thanks to everyone watching today. If you would like to watch more STEM Hero interviews, you can check out our channel, The Energy Coalition, on Vimeo or YouTube, or you can head over to peakstudents.org to view our full STEM Hero library.